My name is Rowan Hale, 31 years old. I knew it would be a disaster before I even parked the car. That feeling where everything in you wants to turn the wheel and keep driving, yet you go in anyway because the invitation said dinner, and you keep trying to believe that word still belongs to your family. I carried a bottle of the wine my mom used to call special occasion, back when the air in their kitchen didn't feel like a courtroom. The label looked the same as the one she once saved for my college graduation. It felt like walking in with a peace flag and a faint memory of who we used to be. The house was warm, too warm, the kind of heat that turns the room sleepy and the walls a little sticky. You notice that when you've been paying the bills. Heat like that costs. I slipped my shoes off by the mat where gravel always collects, listening for the sounds of a normal evening. Pots clinking, a radio low. Instead, I got a hum that felt forced, like the house was performing comfort. My dad greeted me at the doorway as if I were a neighbor who'd dropped by unannounced. My mom gave me a half hug in the kitchen without meeting my eyes, and went back to basting the pot roast like it was her job to keep her hands moving. "Smells good," I said, setting the wine down. She murmured. Not quite words, not quite warmth. We sat. We tried to make the table do the work. Napkins folded, gravy boat centered, beans bright and obedient. My dad started in on the neighbor's kid, Tyler, the one with a job title that sounded important because it had a hyphen. "Smart boy," Dad said, sliding the carving knife through meat with a satisfaction he didn't earn. "Invested at the right time. Bought a boat. A whole boat." He said it like a benediction, like boats descend from the heavens when you are righteous and disciplined enough. I knew, of course, that Tyler's father owned 3 rentals and had slipped him a down payment like it was a handshake. But we've always been big on myths at this table, American ones and family ones, so I swallowed the correction. My mother nodded at the roast as if it had answered a question no one asked. I let it pass and tried to remember the soft years when this room held birthdays and late-night soups and silly arguments about the best brand of vanilla. The conversation stalled. The heat didn't. My dad cleared his throat. He didn't look up when he said it. He kept his eyes on the plate like the words were normal. "You could do more if you weren't so selfish." The fork paused halfway to my mouth. It was a tiny sound, the clink of metal tipping back onto ceramic, but it echoed in my ribs like a door slamming. "What do you mean?" I asked. Not aggressive, just tired. He shrugged with the blade still in his hand. "You know, the fancy apartment, eating out, traveling, spend, spend, spend. Real family doesn't drop a few bills and act like a hero." I didn't plan the laugh. It escaped on its own, a short, dry thing that tasted like medicine. "A few bills." I looked at him, then at my mother, who kept arranging beans that were already arranged. $5,000 this year, I said evenly. Electricity, when that notice came in red. Water when they added the late fees. Gas when it was shut off in March. Internet when your baseball stream stopped working and mom's shows buffered every 30 seconds. He made a face like I'd described the weather. "It's nothing for someone like you," he said, already carving again. "If you really cared, you'd do more." The room narrowed. The too warm air pressed against my skin. I could list the numbers. I could pull out the spreadsheet on my phone, the one I kept so I wouldn't lose track of which account had been rescued on what date. I could show them the confirmation codes that landed in my email like little white flags. But the thing about proof is that it only matters when the person across from you cares to see it. I set my glass down, lifted it again, and met his eyes. "You'll feel that selfishness when the lights go out next week." It didn't come out sharp. It came out calm, almost gentle, the way you speak to a storm you can't avoid. His smile, there had been the beginning of one, the smirk he uses for Tyler's stories and other people's success, folded back into his face like paper. My mom's hand stilled on the spoon. She looked from him to me and back again, as if she'd stumbled upon a conversation in a language she used to speak. No one said anything after that. We chewed in a slow, deliberate way that felt theatrical. The pot roast cooled in the slices he had made. The gravy filmed over. Heat purred from the vents like a stubborn animal. I thought, not for the first time, about the day I logged into their utility portals last winter and saw what final notice looks like in different fonts. I thought about how paying them had felt like an extension of love at first, then a duty, then a ritual I couldn't name. It had turned into a secret ledger I kept in my head. March, gas, April, water. June, electricity, July, internet. August, electricity, again, because they missed the second chance I bought them. My mother reached for the wine and stopped halfway, as if taking it would admit something. She glanced at the counter where the mail usually sat in quiet drifts. Tonight it was tidier than usual, almost tucked away. I had the sense of a hand sweeping things into a drawer when the doorbell rings. My father cleared his throat again, as if gearing up for a moral, then abandoned it. The air returned to the clink and scrape of utensils that don't know what they're saying. I didn't take leftovers. It felt sacred once to leave with a little foil treasure, their way of sending love home with me. I stood, slid my chair in, and said goodnight to no one in particular. My mother moved as if to hug me, and then didn't. My father pretended to concentrate on a stubborn bit of fat he had no intention of eating. The night outside was already cold, the kind that needles your face and wakes your better judgment. I rolled the window down on the drive home and let the air cut through what was left of my anger until only resolve remained. I had done the thing daughters are supposed to do. I'd bridged and patched and excused. I'd told myself gratitude is optional and dignity is a luxury. I'd told myself love must always pay the bill, but love that never gets named turns into something else. Standing in my apartment, I could see the difference clearly, as if the wind had sanded the idea smooth. I opened my laptop and signed into the utilities the way I had 100 times. Electricity, water, gas, internet, the four horsemen of a comfortable house. Each login page knew me too well. It auto-filled my email, then my card number with the small, indifferent kindness of a machine. I found the auto-pay toggles by muscle memory. Off, 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 off. The paid-to dates blinked back at me, dates I knew better than birthdays now. I scrolled to the place where payment methods live, little numbers masked by asterisks as if they could be embarrassed. I hovered, then removed my card from each account. The screen asked me to confirm. Are you sure? I had never been more sure. There was a moment after the last click when the apartment felt too quiet, as if the lights themselves were holding their breath. I looked around at my tidy, modest things, lamp, plant, stack of unread library books, and waited for guilt to arrive in its reliable coat. It didn't. Something else did. Not triumph, not relief, just a clean line drawn in air. I could finally breathe. I thought about my mother's eyes tracking the mail pile and how quickly she looked away. I thought about my father's voice when he said you and hero, like accusations, how he said real family, as though the price of admission was endless. There are roles in a family that carve themselves into you. Mediator, fixer, scapegoat, ghost. Tonight I declined the casting. Before I shut the laptop, I pulled up the power company screen one more time. The unpaid balance sat there like a brick on a shelf, heavy and patient. Next to it, a date. I didn't need to mark it on a calendar. I knew when their due cycles rolled through. My body had learned the rhythm without asking. The page glowed blue-white in the dark room, a quiet fuse coiled and waiting. I closed the lid and let the apartment go dim around me. The kind of darkness you choose, the kind that doesn't scare you. I brushed my teeth and, out of habit, checked my phone for a text that hadn't been sent yet. Thank you, I imagined it might say someday. 2 words I had carried in my chest like a small seed. But there are some seeds that will not sprout in certain soil, no matter how much water you pour. When I finally lay down, the city sounds moved through the window like a faraway ocean. Sirens threading themselves thin, a bus wheezing at the corner, someone laughing into a phone on the sidewalk below. I listened until the noises blurred. I pictured the thermostat in that too-warm hallway set to indulgent. I pictured my mother's hands keeping busy to keep the peace. I pictured the mail tucked neatly out of sight. There was a story they liked to tell themselves about me, that I had abundance to spare, that my few bills were nothing, that my boundaries were coldness dressed as adulthood. A different story flickered at the edge of my mind, one where heat is turned down to a sane number, and gratitude is a language everyone speaks, not just a wish whispered over a sink full of dishes. Morning would come. The bill cycle would do what it always does, and when the house finally exhaled and went dark, he would call it punishment. I would call it proof. I slept. The fuse burned quietly on. The lights went out on a Wednesday. Not a storm, not an outage in the neighborhood, just the slow blink of consequence finally catching up. It started mid-morning when the power company's system cleared the grace period I used to bridge each month. I was at work, eyes blurry from spreadsheets, when my phone lit up with my mother's name. She never called during office hours. Not once. Not unless someone was in a hospital bed. I let it ring. No voicemail. A minute later, a text appeared. Power's out. Do you know what happened? I stared at it. I typed yes, deleted it, typed call the company, deleted that too. Then I put the phone face down and went back to pretending that focus could drown out feeling. At lunch, another message. Just cover this month. We're figuring it out. By the time I got home that evening, my screen was a stack of missed calls. Mom 5 times, Dad once, and one from an unfamiliar number that I already knew belonged to Aunt Linda, the family's self-appointed peacemaker. Her voicemail started syrup sweet and curdled halfway through. Sweetheart, I'm sure this is all a misunderstanding. Your parents are having a tough time. Maybe we can sit down and talk. Family shouldn't let things get to this point. Then the shift. You know, pride can make fools of good people. Call me back. I didn't. That night, the city hummed outside my apartment window, while somewhere across town, my parents' house sat in candlelight. I pictured my dad pretending it was an adventure, calling it temporary, while my mom wrapped herself in old blankets she'd saved from my college dorm. I should have felt guilty. I didn't. Not yet. The next morning brought a colder message. Freezing here. The irony wasn't lost on me. The man who called me selfish for doing too little now huddled under layers waiting for someone else to fix it. By evening, I had 5 new voicemails. Mom's voice strained. Rowan, please, we just need a few days. Dad's brittle and smug. I hope this makes you feel powerful. Then another. Don't come crawling back when your life falls apart. And finally the one that made me sit down on the floor. You've always been a disappointment. This just proves it. The words didn't sting the way he wanted them to. They landed like dust, evidence of how many times he'd tried to make guilt the currency of love. I poured tea, turned on every light in my apartment, and watched a show I didn't like just to hear laughter in the room. When the credits rolled, I noticed the hum of my fridge, the warmth of my heater, the comfort of paid bills. Stability has a sound. Day 3, the knock came. It was Blake, my cousin, with his girlfriend hovering beside him like she wished she were anywhere else. He didn't even wait for me to invite him in. Your dad told everyone you left them without power on purpose, he said. I leaned against the doorframe. That's accurate. He's saying you're punishing them, Blake added, voice low, embarrassed. Maybe he's finally right about something. Blake's girlfriend shifted. They're freezing, she said softly. Your mom looks awful. Maybe she should stop standing next to him. Blake sighed. He says you owe them, after everything they did for you growing up. There it was, the holy line of family accounting. I'd expected it, but hearing it out loud felt like touching a bruise. I smiled without humor. You know what they did for me? They taught me to clean up after other people's messes. Lesson's over. He nodded, unsure whether to agree or retreat. Then he said something that almost sounded like a warning. You know they're going to blame you for everything now, right? I already knew, I said. But they're wrong about one thing. I'm not done yet. That night I sat by the window with the city lights reflecting in the glass. Somewhere inside that blacked-out house, my father was likely pacing, crafting the next story that would make him the victim and me the villain. He'd call cousins, old friends, maybe even my childhood teacher if he could find her number. He'd paint me cold, ungrateful, cruel. And the audience would nod because people love a martyr, especially when he tells them he's the one left in the dark. But what none of them would ask was why he was in the dark to begin with. They wouldn't ask how many bills I'd paid, how many quiet rescues I'd performed before I stopped. They wouldn't ask why my mother never noticed the unpaid envelopes piling up beside the toaster, or how long she'd been living on denial instead of warmth. They'd only ask why I stopped. Because stopping is always louder than helping. At midnight, I opened my laptop again, not to pay anything this time, but to check the balance. The accounts were officially delinquent. My name was gone, my card removed, and the balance due sat there, untouched. I imagined my father staring at the same screen, jaw tight, ego bruised by a number he couldn't cover. He'd call it cruelty. I called it clarity. I closed the computer and turned off the lamp. The glow from outside sliced across the ceiling in pale stripes. I thought about calling my mom just once, just to make sure she was safe, but the thought came with a condition I couldn't meet. If she answered and asked for help without acknowledgement, without the smallest sliver of accountability, I'd be dragged right back into the loop. So I let the silence do the talking for both of us. On the morning of the fourth day, my phone buzzed again. Not from her, from Aunt Linda. This time not a voicemail, but a text that started sweet and ended sharp. Family takes care of each other. Don't let this go on. People are starting to talk. People always talk when control shifts hands. I didn't answer. An hour later, another buzz. Unknown number. I let it go to voicemail. A man's voice I didn't recognize said, "Your parents asked me to check on you. You might want to call them before they do something stupid." That word, stupid, hung there. My father's stupidity was a family legend, but this time it carried weight. I sat with the phone in my lap for a long minute. Then I opened the freezer, took out a tray of ice, and watched it fog in the air. Small luxuries, immediate proof that I'd chosen self-preservation over performance. Late that night, the messages stopped. My phone stayed dark except for the faint reflection of my face on the screen. The quiet should have felt peaceful. Instead, it was the kind that comes before something breaks. I didn't know yet that the break wouldn't come from outside. It would come from inside the family, from someone who finally decided the silence had gone on too long. But that part belonged to tomorrow. For now, I turned off my own lights by choice, climbed into bed, and listened to the hum of a working world still powered on. 3 days. That's all it took for love built on obligation to short circuit. 3 days for power to shift. And in the dark, every truth waits its turn to be seen. By the 5th day, silence had settled into the corners like dust. No more calls, no more guilt-laced voicemails, no, please, just this once. The quiet should have been a relief. Instead, it hummed with something unfinished. I found out what broke it on a Sunday morning. I was scrolling through my feed, half awake, when a photo stopped me. It was Aunt Sharon's page. She'd posted a picture of my mom sitting at her kitchen table, a mug of tea in her hands, a blanket draped across her lap. The caption read, "Family takes care of family." The kind of line that's meant to sound noble but hides an entire war underneath. At first, I was just startled. My mom hadn't called, hadn't texted. Seeing her there, safe, tired, but away, was like catching sight of a ghost, realizing it could walk through walls. But then my eyes shifted. Behind her, on the counter, was a small stack of unopened mail, and right on top, my handwriting. The envelope was one I'd mailed months ago, a check for the gas bill. I'd thought they must have cashed it. When it never cleared, I assumed I'd written the wrong date or address. But no, it was sitting there, still sealed, still perfectly untouched. A knot pulled tight in my stomach. If that check was never opened, then where had the rest of my money gone? That night I drove back. Not to make peace, not even to talk. I needed answers. It was October cold now, the kind that bites through denim. The neighborhood looked dim, curtains drawn, porch lights off. My parents' house sat at the end of the block, like a body waiting for identification. I didn't knock. The key still worked, the same brass one I'd carried on my ring for years. They'd probably forgotten I even had it. The air hit me first, a sour mix of burnt wax, old food, and something metallic like rusted pipes. The living room was a flicker of candles melting onto saucers, their wax puddles hardened into strange shapes. No TV, no hum of appliances, just the faint ticking of a wall clock. I walked straight to the roll-top desk by the window. My dad's desk, the one he used to guard like it held the nuclear codes. It was never left open. Except now it was, half rolled, as if someone had been digging through and given up. Inside, a mountain of paper waited. Bills, bank statements, collection notices. Some envelopes were slit open neatly. Others had been ripped apart in panic. I started sorting by instinct, the same way you triage disaster. Look for the most recent, the most severe. And then I saw them. My checks. At least 6 of them, some cashed, some not, all addressed to utility companies. But the deposits didn't match. The funds weren't going where they were supposed to. They were going into another account, one that wasn't joint, one with only one name on it, my father's. At first, I thought maybe I was wrong. Maybe there was some mix-up. But then I looked closer at the statements. Online transfers, betting apps, sportsbook deposits, overdraft fees, rejected transactions. It wasn't a pattern of accident. It was addiction. Every time I paid a bill, the money disappeared into the same hole. Every thank you I waited for had been traded for a bet slip and a false promise that this time would be the win that fixed it all. There were thousands missing, far more than the $5,000 I'd spent keeping the lights on. And then, at the bottom of the drawer, I found the letter. Typed formal, dated 3 weeks ago. Notice of lien, property at risk of foreclosure. My hand went cold around the paper. They were on the edge of losing the house, and they hadn't told a soul. Behind me, a floorboard creaked. I turned. My father stood halfway down the stairs, holding a flashlight and a half-empty bottle. The light cut across his face in a way that made him look older than I remembered, yet the expression was the same. Defensive, mean, certain. "What are you doing here?" he asked, voice low and flat. I held up one of the unopened envelopes. "I could ask you the same thing about these." He frowned. "You had no right to go through my things." "Your things?" I said quietly. "You mean the house I paid to keep warm? The bills I covered? The checks you cashed and never used?" He didn't move, didn't blink, just took another swig from the bottle. "You always thought you were better than us," he said. "That's the problem. You think money makes you moral." I stepped forward. "No, but lying about it makes you small." His eyes flicked toward the desk like a man cornered. For a second, I saw something fragile. Shame, maybe, but then it vanished behind the same sneer I'd grown up with. "Get out," he muttered. I didn't argue. I just placed the unopened envelope back on the pile, turned toward the door, and said, "You're right about one thing, Dad." He squinted. "I am done pretending." Outside, the air sliced sharp. The neighborhood was so quiet I could hear the wind skimming over dry leaves. I got into my car and sat there for a long time with my hands on the wheel, staring at the front door that had been mine once. That desk had told me everything I needed to know. He wasn't losing control. He'd already lost it. And the worst part wasn't the money or the lies. It was how easily he'd turned every act of care into a transaction he could manipulate. That was the night I stopped confusing love with loyalty. Driving away, I realized something else. This wasn't just about cutting him off. It was about stopping the quiet inheritance of dysfunction that passes down like furniture, sturdy, familiar, and rotten inside. The streetlights blurred as I turned the corner, leaving that cold, dead house behind. That was the last time I ever stepped inside. 2 days later, my phone rang again. This time, it wasn't my father or my mother. It was Aunt Sharon. Her voice was clipped, serious. "Rowan, I need to ask you something. Is it true they haven't had power or water for over a week?" I didn't bother softening it. "Yes, it's true, and it's not an accident." Silence stretched thin on the other end. Then she said quietly, "Okay," and hung up. By noon the next day, she'd driven straight to their house. She didn't call first, didn't text, just showed up, walked inside, and when she left, she took my mother with her. Not my father, just my mother. I found out not from either of them, but from Facebook. Aunt Sharon again. A photo of her and Mom sitting at the same kitchen table I'd seen before. 2 mugs of tea, a blanket over my mom's lap, sunlight falling across the counter. The caption read, "Family takes care of family. Always." That word again, always, like a warning disguised as comfort. But this time I wasn't angry. I just stared at my mother's face. She looked exhausted, pale, smaller somehow. But there was something else there too. Relief, a flicker of it. Still, my eyes caught on the background. Behind her was that same counter, the pile of unopened mail, the envelope with my handwriting still sitting there, untouched. Proof of everything. That night my phone buzzed. One voicemail. Her voice was soft, trembling, like she was speaking from inside a wound. "I didn't know, Rowan. I swear I didn't know." No greeting, no preamble, just that sentence. I listened to it twice before calling her back. She picked up on the first ring. "Mom," I said. She started crying, not loud, not wailing, just the quiet, broken kind that fills the spaces between words. "I didn't know about the other account," she said. "I didn't know about the checks, or the gambling, or the letter from the lawyer. He never let me see the mail. If I asked, he'd say he had it under control." Her voice cracked. "Every time I got suspicious, he'd give me just enough of an answer to make me stop asking." "Mom," I said again, but softer this time. "I think I'm going to separate," she whispered. "I don't know if I can, but I think I have to try." It wasn't confidence. It was the sound of someone trying a new language. "You don't need permission," I told her. "Not from him, not from me." She didn't answer, but I could hear her breathing shift, like she'd just realized there was still oxygen left in the world. That weekend, she came to stay with me. 1 suitcase, no jewelry, no wedding ring. She didn't bring much else, just a few sweaters and a small pouch zipped shut like a secret. She refused to take my bed, said the couch felt less intrusive. I made soup. She cleaned my already clean counters. I think she just needed to move, to keep her hands busy, so her mind didn't collapse under the weight of it all. We didn't talk about him. Not at first. The silence between us was different now. Not the brittle kind that hides things, but the careful kind that waits until you're ready. On Monday morning, the buzzer rang. I was brushing my teeth. The intercom camera showed him, my father, standing at the front steps like he belonged there. He pressed the buzzer again, then started yelling my name into the speaker, his voice cracking through the static. "Rowan, you selfish coward! Open the door! You think you're better than your own family?" My mom stood by the window, curtain half drawn, staring down at him. She didn't blink, didn't move. He shouted for 10 minutes, then stopped, looked around, realized no one was coming out to defend him. He walked away, stumbling like a man who couldn't decide whether he was angry or lost. I didn't breathe until the silence settled again. That evening, my phone buzzed. Unknown number. One image, no text. I opened it, and my breath caught. It was my father standing in front of the house, our house, holding a cardboard sign. The words written in black marker, "My daughter stole my wife and left me homeless." I stared at it so long that the phone dimmed and locked itself. My stomach turned, not from guilt, but from recognition. This was his next story. The one where he's the victim again. The one where shame wears the costume of injustice. He was taking his pain public and dragging me through it. I sent the photo to my mom. She replied almost instantly. "He doesn't know yet, but I filed today." Then another message. "Thank you for showing me." I read that twice, maybe 3 times. That was the moment I realized something fundamental had broken. Not just the marriage, but the myth of it. The story he'd built for decades of being the protector, the provider, the man in control, was collapsing, and he didn't know how to live without it. By the end of the week, the photo had made the rounds. Of course it had. Relatives called in waves. Some outraged, some confused, some pretending to be neutral. Aunt Linda left me a voicemail that started polite and ended sharp. "Whatever's going on, airing it publicly is wrong. You're only hurting yourself." But others were starting to connect the dots. The gambling, the unpaid bills, the way he'd let my mother freeze while he hoarded what little money they had left. Even Blake called. "I saw the picture," he said. "He's saying you ruined him." "I didn't ruin him," I said quietly. "I just stopped saving him." He didn't argue, just sighed. "Yeah, that sounds about right." Mom spent her days quietly setting up new things. A bank account in her own name, a P.O. box, a notebook where she wrote down every password she could remember. She even went to the DMV to change her address. When I asked how it felt, she said, "Strange, but like standing up after sitting too long." At night, she slept deeply for the first time in years. And sometimes, when she thought I wasn't looking, she smiled for no reason at all. The day the divorce papers were officially filed, she walked into the kitchen, poured 2 cups of coffee, and said, almost casually, "I think I'll start looking for a small place to rent." I nodded. "I'll help." She looked at me then, really looked, her eyes clearer than I'd seen them in months. "I don't know what happens next," she said. "You live," I told her. "That's what happens next." She smiled, just barely, and whispered, "Finally." That was the moment I knew something irreversible had shifted. For years, my father's control had been the sun our lives revolved around. Now it had gone dark. And instead of freezing, we found out we could make our own light. The cardboard sign picture should have been the end of it. But people like my father don't surrender narratives. They rewrite them. Within days, new stories spread through the family like smoke. He's heartbroken. She took everything. She brainwashed her mother. The details changed depending on who was listening, but the plot stayed the same. I was the villain, and he was the man destroyed by his ungrateful daughter. For a while, I didn't respond. I let the noise eat itself. But eventually, the phone started ringing again. Different numbers, unfamiliar area codes, always the same message under the polite tone. "Be the bigger person, Rowan. Make peace. Family is family." They meant fix it, like always. I didn't. Then came his voice again. The first voicemail was almost calm. "You made your point. Now grow up and come talk to me." The second turned bitter. "You think you're better than everyone because you pay your own bills? You'll fall soon enough." The third was quieter, almost pathetic. "I didn't mean what I said at dinner. You know I get angry sometimes. Tell your mother to come home." The fourth, rage again. "Ungrateful brat, you'll regret this. You'll end up alone like her." The fifth, the one that made me finally block every number he could possibly use, started gentle and ended in something I'll never forget. "You think you've won, Rowan? You think you're better because you've got your little apartment and your savings? I made you. When you fall, and you will, don't think I'll be there to pick you up." The line went dead, with the sound of his breathing still heavy on the recording. I sat on my couch, the voicemail replaying in my head. It didn't scare me, it clarified everything. He wasn't calling to reconnect. He was calling to reclaim control. When I blocked him, it felt anticlimactic. A single button press. Years of noise. Gone. I sent a message to the extended family group chat. I'm not relaying messages anymore. If you want to talk to me, but I'm not the bridge between him and anyone else. Half of them stayed silent. A few sent heart emojis, which felt strange in the middle of what was basically an exorcism. One cousin wrote, "We get it, enough's enough." But Aunt Linda couldn't resist. "He's still your father," she said. "You'll regret cutting blood ties someday." I replied, "I already regret keeping them this long." She left the chat. Mom stayed quiet through all of it. She'd moved into my apartment's second bedroom temporarily and treated the space like borrowed peace, gentle, careful, grateful. She woke early, made coffee, folded laundry that was already folded. Every morning, she said, "You don't know how strange it is to wake up without waiting for a fight." I told her I did know. By week 3, she started making plans. Small ones at first. Open a new checking account. Look for part-time work. Call the library about volunteer shifts. Then bigger. Look for a rental, maybe a studio, somewhere with windows and quiet. It wasn't about escaping anymore. It was about ownership. One night, Blake came by. He stood awkwardly at the doorway, cap in his hands like a teenager. "I wanted to say I'm sorry," he said, "for what I said when I came here. I didn't know about everything." "You weren't supposed to," I said. "He made sure of that." He nodded. "He's been calling everyone, trying to make people pick sides." And he looked at me. I'm not picking his. That was the first real apology from anyone connected to him. It didn't fix much, but it felt like air entering a sealed room. Before he left, he said, "You did the right thing, you know, but that doesn't mean it won't cost you." He was right. The cost came slowly. The cousins who believed him stopped inviting us to holidays. Old family friends, people who once sent me Christmas cards, unfriended me online. My dad's old coworker messaged me once. "He's hurting, you know." I wrote back, "So did we. We just stopped pretending." And through it all, Mom kept moving forward. She got her own debit card, learned to pay bills online, laughed the first time she saw her own name on a utility statement. "These things used to come in his name only," she said, holding the paper like it was proof of existence. Then came Aunt Linda again. She called one evening, her tone the same mix of guilt and command I'd grown up hearing. "I've been thinking, Rowan, maybe you should pay off the lien. The house is part of your family history." I almost laughed. "The house is part of his addiction," I said. "History doesn't make it worth saving. You can't just let it go." "I already did." For a moment, she was silent. Then she whispered, "He's going to lose everything." "Good," I said. "Maybe that's the only way he'll see what he's done." I hung up before she could answer. A few days later, Mom came home from running errands, cheeks pink from the cold, holding 2 paper bags of groceries. She set them down and smiled in that shy, new way she had. "I found a place, Pa," she said. "Already?" "It's small, but it's mine. A little rental near the library." I hugged her. For the first time, she didn't flinch at affection. That night, we packed her things, her suitcase, her books, a single photo album. She looked at the door before we left. "Funny," she said. "I used to think leaving meant failure. Now it feels like permission." The next Sunday, we sat at her new place drinking coffee. It smelled like fresh paint and thrift store furniture. The walls were soft green. White curtains moved gently in the breeze. "It doesn't echo him," she said quietly. "That's my favorite part." I smiled. "That's how you know it's home." She nodded, then added, "You know what's strange? Silence doesn't scare me anymore." That was when I realized peace has its own sound. Soft, steady, almost shy. And sometimes the real cost of boundaries isn't losing people. It's finally hearing yourself think. It's been 5 months since the last message, the last knock, the last trace of his voice in our lives. 5 months of quiet. Not the brittle kind we used to survive, but the kind that feels like air after a long dive. I didn't realize how loud life had been until it wasn't. Mom's new place sits at the edge of town, near the library where she works part-time. A single-story rental with creaky floors, chipped window frames, and sunlight that falls in perfect squares across the kitchen table every morning. She painted the walls soft green herself. "The color of starting over," she said. The first time I visited, she'd already unpacked. No boxes in sight, no clutter, just thrifted furniture, clean counters, and peace. This is the first place I've lived that doesn't echo him, she said, setting 2 mugs of coffee down. When I wake up now, I don't feel my stomach knot. I just wake up. I smiled. That's what healing feels like. She looked at the mug, then back at me. I didn't think I'd ever get here. Neither did I. Sometimes I still drive past the old house. It's different now. The porch light stays off even at night. The curtains are drawn. Once, I saw a for sale sign half buried in snow. Another time, the front yard was overgrown, the mailbox hanging crooked. He's still there, I think. Or maybe he's moved on to another story, another audience. The last time I saw him was by accident, a cold February afternoon, red lights at the intersection near the market. He was walking along the sidewalk, coat buttoned wrong, shoulders hunched. He didn't see me. For a split second, I almost rolled the window down. Some small, naive part of me still wanted to ask if he was okay, if he was eating, if he regretted anything. But I didn't. I just watched him pass by the crosswalk and disappear behind a bus stop, swallowed by the blur of traffic. That was enough. Closure isn't a conversation. It's a decision. Mom and I see each other every Sunday. We don't talk about him. We fold laundry, swap groceries, water the little plants she keeps on the windowsill. She started collecting secondhand books from the library, ones they're about to throw away. I like the ones with names inside, she said once. It means someone loved them before. Sometimes she sends me home with leftovers wrapped in foil. You don't eat enough, she still says, out of habit. But her tone has changed. It's not worry laced with control anymore. It's care, simple and clean. Then, last month, a package arrived at my door. No return address, just my name in her handwriting. Inside was my baby book, a small photo album, and a folded note. The note read, "You didn't just save yourself, you saved me too. I'm sorry it took me so long to follow you out." I sat with it for a long time, the kind of silence that holds both grief and grace. I thought about all the nights I'd begged for acknowledgement, all the years I mistook endurance for love, and how freedom sometimes looks like two women sitting at separate kitchen tables drinking coffee in peace. I didn't set out to destroy my relationship with my father. I didn't even set out to change anything. But somewhere between his silence and his lies, I realized I was still begging for respect from a man who never offered it freely. I kept waiting for the version of him that only existed in apology daydreams. When I stopped waiting, everything changed. There was no grand confrontation, no courtroom scene, no tears on the doorstep, just the quiet. And in that quiet, something grew that had never had room before: choice. Now, when I wake up, I don't check my phone for new messages. I water the plant on my windowsill. I make coffee. I let the morning light hit the walls and think about how far a single boundary can stretch when you hold it steady. People still say family is forever. They mean it like a promise. But I've learned it's a reminder of where you start, not where you have to stay. Sometimes, to protect what's left of yourself, you have to leave the family you were born into and build one made of truth, boundaries, and quiet Sunday mornings. And that's enough.